Hi, this is Shaun, and in this video I'm going to go over the UDK Morph workflow. So let's take a quick look at the final result here. Hit play, you walk up to the face, the eyes turn green, it gets a little serious, and when you back off, you should go back to smiling. So there we go, great. Alright, so how did I make this? Well, I started out in Maya. I have a head that I've modeled. I'm going to duplicate that head, slide that over so I've got the same number of vertices and also the same vertex count. And you can actually take a look at the vertex count under the polygon display menu component IDs. And so each vertex has a number associated with it. So you could conceivably create a morph with two objects of the same number of vertices, but it might look different because if the vertex count changes. So let's just turn that off. So I've actually already sculpted and created, let's go back here. I've already created a head with some emotion. There's the smiling guy. And so in order to create a blend shape between these two, you select this object, shift select here, hit F2 to go into the animations submenu, and I'm going to go create deformers blend shape. So that creates a blend shape node here. Now if I middle mouse and scrub, you can see that transition. Okay, and so now that we've got the vertex animation information in this node, we actually don't need this object. So you can see the blend shape node still exists. But before I export this, the other thing that's required in UDK is that this is actually a skeletal mesh. And so we need at least one bone in order for this to work. So I'm going to go over skeleton, use the joint tool. We'll just drop this onto the skeleton. So I've got the skeleton selected, the mesh, and I'm going to skin it. So there we go. It's a skinned mesh. You can see that. And now I'm going to export this. Export all. What's important is to make sure that you're exporting, the standard smoothing groups, but also you'll want to make sure that you have in the deformed models, blend shapes checked. Then the FBX will export the information. And so I'll export this as face morph. Call this face morph 3. There we go. And now let's import that into UDK. So back in UDK here, I'm going to import face morph 3. You want to make sure that the import type is skeletal mesh. The morph targets is checked here, and we'll call this my package morph, my morph, just so we get an empty package. And if all goes well, you'll get the face morph that comes in and a morph target set. Like right now, by default, it's sort of facing to the side. So if I had had it on the, looks like it's the plus X direction, we would have had that facing the camera, the face facing the camera. Okay, so you can see that I've got a morph target set. When I double click that, it opens up the anim set editor. And it also opens up this right here. And this is going to be critical because part of making an interactive morph target set work in UDK is that you have to hook together several variables across several editors inside of UDK. It's just basically the graphical user interface version of doing it with code, where you're referencing just different classes. And so you can see that the information came in correctly as I scrub across this bar here. So that's good. This main head, we're going to call this face morph. And that's going to be our variable we're going to reference in just a second. Okay, so I've got the face morph. I'm going to save my package here. I'm going to create a couple things that I'm going to need for this. I'm going to need an anim tree. We'll get to that in a second. In addition, we also need a physics asset for this so that people can bump into the object. So I'm going to create a default physics asset for this head. I mean, we're not going to do anything physics-wise. It's just about the morph in this demo, but I mean, you can sort of turn on and turn off the physics properties and see that it works now. All right, but what we're going to focus on is the anim tree, which we have open here. And so this is the default anim tree, and we can see you have a morph node. So to get started, we need to load in, well, it's good to load in a preview mesh. So the preview mesh is going to be our skeletal mesh. So I've selected that. And we've got the preview mesh, and preview skeletal mesh is going to be the head. So I click that, and now we can see the head in the viewer. Great. Now we need to create two nodes in order to make this work. There's additional nodes that I think you should look over if you have a chance. You can specify several others. There's like, it looks like you could do blend shapes based on like rotation of joints and stuff. But for this one, it's just a simple morph. So for this example, we just need a morph node pose. And in between that, I'm holding down Control and left click to move those around. And in between those, we're going to put a morph node weight. All right, so we're going to start plugging in variable names into these nodes here. So we've got the morph node weight is going to, we're going to call that morph control, because that's going to control in a 0 to 1 sense our morph. And the last node here is the node name that we gave to our morph target set. So I'm going to double check and just copy and paste that. So we'll just call that like face morph end. And we'll just copy and paste that in there. So there it is. And this one we said we're going to call morph control, because that's the variable that we're going to reference inside of matinee in order to control the morph. So just remember this variable, because we're going to have to also plug it into matinee. So that should pretty much set it up. We should be all good to go. So now we're going to bring the asset into UDK. Now, you're probably just used to clicking and dragging objects right into UDK, right? And it's a skeletal mesh, but in this case, it needs to specifically be a special type of skeletal mesh. It has to be a skeletal mesh mat. So make sure you bring it in as a skeletal mesh mat, otherwise it just won't work. So brought that in, and we need to hook in 3 variables. And you can also see that I sort of have the pivot offset. So when you bring in your objects into UDK, make sure you have them centered on the axis in Maya, and then the 0, 0, 0 axis. So let's go into the object properties. So here we are, and if you go into the skeletal mesh component, you need to find and plug in the 3 things that you've created. Basically, you have to plug in your anim tree, your physics asset, and the morph target set. So we'll start out by plugging in the anim tree, and there we go. And now we're plugging the physics asset, and plug that in, and then we'll go into the morph target set. And you can see by the fact that you can click and create multiple morph target sets that, that's a possibility also. But in this case, we're just going to do 1 for the example. So, okay, so now we've got those all plugged in. Now we should be able to go into Kismet. I'll close these out. Just clean up our screen a little bit. So going to Kismet, and you can see the get a glimpse of the Kismet that I created for the other one, which is it's pretty much the matinee and then a few extra things where I actually set the material of the eyes to change and turn to a glowing green material, and I also toggle on and off those lights there. But we're not going to do that for this video. We're just going to go over how to make the face smile and not smile. So here we are back in matinee, and I'm going to add a trigger in order to make this trigger, and play when you've touched the trigger, and you can sort of specify 0 for infinite touches, or you could like just plug in any random number. Maybe we'll do 11 here. It doesn't really matter, it's just an example. So we're going to go into matinee, and in matinee we need first an empty group, and then we need a morph weight, a new morph weight node here, and we'll set some keyframes by hitting enter on the keyboard, and we'll right click here. The first keyframe is 0 and the second we'll set to 1. And then finally we really need to name the morph node name, which was morph control. And you can see that that's working, and if it's all hooked up correct, if we scrubbed through the timeline here, it should play. And it is. So wonderful. Let's just quickly test this out in the game engine, and they'll call it a day. So here we are, we hit the trigger, and oh, look, it's smiling. How nice. All right, thanks so much for watching.